Greetings, everyone. My name is Sharon J., and I am the manager of the team implementing our building performance policy. I also have Derek Valenti with me, who is also going to help with the webinar today. We are recording this, so we are going to be putting this on our website later. So if you missed any of the information, you could always go back and review the video. We also have a new process guide that is just posted on our website earlier today. We have everyone muted, and we are going to answer questions at the end through the Q&A box. So if you have any questions along the way, please put them in the Q&A section, and then we will answer them at the end of the session. I think this session is only going to go about 30 minutes today. We have about 20 slides of information, so hopefully we'll get you out of here early. So the reason we are doing third-party data verification in our program is that complete and accurate benchmarking is the foundation for building performance standards. What we found when we were analyzing and looking at the data as we were building out the program this past year is that an estimated 35% do an incredible job in submitting very detailed benchmarking reports, and you can see that with the level of detail that they put in those reports. We think about 30% do an okay job, but the information they put in the benchmarking report may not be detailed enough for a building performance standard. We think about 30% do the bare minimum to check the boxes for an approved report. That's because we get a lot of default values checked in Portfolio Manager when the information is submitted to us. And then we do still have about 5% of our buildings that have never submitted a benchmarking report. So this is why we are requesting third-party data verification in certain situations. So let's talk a little bit about benchmarking and how detailed it needs to be. First, we'll start talking about normalized performance targets. So we'd like everybody to double check square footage and energy data coming in from Excel's auto upload. We are now giving some new guidance on breaking out building types. The building can either benchmark as one building type following Energy Star guidelines, like if they are majority office, they can just benchmark as an office. Or if they have high intensity building types, they should or could break them out by square footage. This would be an example of, let's say, a downtown Denver building where it's mostly office, but they have retail stores and restaurants in the lower floor. Items that can be excluded from benchmarking or entered as negative entries if they are submeters are swimming pool energy use, parking area energy use, electric vehicle charging stations, or third-party loads, like an example of a cell tower antenna or a billboard on the building. So this is an example of what breaking out high-intensity use spaces what it can do for your targets. So I'm going to use an example of a strip mall. On the left side box, one strip mall, they had 10 different units. They benchmarked following the Portfolio Manager guidelines as 100% strip mall. If they did that, then their 2030 target would be a 66.6. If that same strip mall broke out their property type uses, and they were 20% restaurants, 60% grocery store, 20% retail store, then their 2030 target would be a 146.2. If that same strip mall had a different breakdown and they were 50% restaurants, 10% bar or nightclub, 10% fast food, and 30% retail, their 2030 target would be a 149.9. So you could see what a huge difference their benchmarking and breaking down those high intensity property types would make on their target. So for our target adjustments, we have different reasons as to why you can submit a target adjustment. What this does is it adjusts the final 2030 energy performance target of the building, and it uses the 2019 baseline to make changes to the interim targets. So we have target adjustments available now for data centers, operating hours for certain building types, swimming pools, and parking. So on the previous slide, I told you you could exclude those spaces. If you do not have these spaces submetered, this is when you could ask for a target adjustment for that energy use. You can also turn in a target adjustment for if your previous benchmarking submissions were incorrect, like you had the wrong building types, your square footage was incorrect, you had inaccurate energy data, or you didn't break out those high intensity spaces. For future building alterations, if you have a building type that was changed due to a renovation, or you added or demolished square footage, then you can do target adjustments anytime in the next 10 years based on what is happening in your building. So when you benchmark for target adjustments, it's really important for the benchmarking report to reflect certain items that can receive those target adjustments if the energy use could not be excluded. So if you are turning in a target adjustment for operating hours, swimming pools, data center, or parking, and you did not have that information in your last benchmarking report, you will have to update your benchmarking report and resubmit it with the target adjustment. Then we are asking that third-party data verification of your 2019 baseline benchmarking report, or the most recent year, whichever one is easier to do third-party data verification on. That verification is required for target adjustments. So digging into the third-party data verification requirements, we have two different reasons that we are asking for third-party data verification. We have benchmarking performance evaluation years, and then the target adjustments. So talking about performance evaluation, we are not requiring that you have third-party data verification for every single year that you turn in a benchmarking report. Only in the years where we are actually going to take that benchmarking report and then evaluate your performance when your target is due is when we require the third-party data verification. So if your target is due, first target is due in 2024, which is only 5% of our buildings, then you would have to have third-party data verification for the calendar year that's ending December 31st, 2024. So that full 12 months of energy data for 2024 is what has to be verified. 95% of our buildings have their first target due in 2025. So the year ending December 31st, 2025 is what you would have to have third-party verified. Same with 2027 and 2030. If you are having a target adjustment, if it's a square footage or inaccurate energy data correction, then we really want that baseline to be verified because that affects all of your interim targets. If you are just getting more detailed on your benchmarking report, like the building type classification, you had an alteration, operating hours, parking, swimming pools, and any other future target adjustments that we add, you could use the most recent. If it's more convenient for you to still do the baseline, that's fine. You can either use baseline or most recent. So third-party data verifier requirements. Approved data verifiers have one of the following licenses, credentials, or certifications and are in good standing with that organization. So it can be a professional engineer, a licensed architect, a certified energy manager, a building energy assessment professional, and an energy management professional. We could possibly add other licenses or credentials, and we will post those on our website and put them into our next technical guidance update. That's what we did with the energy management professional credential when we added it in December 2022. So data verifier requirements, the data verifier cannot be the building owner or an employee of the building owner, and it can't be the building owner's designee or an employee of that designee who prepares or submits the benchmarking information in Portfolio Manager. So the person who prepares the benchmarking cannot be the person who verifies that benchmarking. But for example, if a company is hired by the building owner to complete the benchmarking submission, an employee of that company cannot be the third-party data verifier, but that company could subcontract another company to serve as the data verifier to make it easier for the building owner to contract the service. We just added 2 exceptions to this rule. So the following licensees can perform third-party data verification on benchmarking if they have previously completed for the building owners. So professional engineers and licensed registered architects can do verification on their own benchmarking that they performed for a building owner. So for the next few slides, we're going to dig into the data verification process. For the items that are starred, I'm going to go through a very high-level version of this process, but I'd encourage you to look at our new data verification process guide for the step-by-step instructions. It will actually walk you through what to click on in Portfolio Manager, what to enter, and then what to submit. So we're going to go through the first through 6 steps. Building owner connects with the data verifier in Portfolio Manager. The building owner then shares the property with the data verifier. Building owner gathers information to support verification. Then the data verifier confirms the benchmarking data and possibly updates it. Data verifier then generates the checklist, and then they complete the checklist and submit it. So for the first step, the building owner connects with the data verifier inside Portfolio Manager. On the left-hand side is the first step. The building owner needs to send a request to connect to that person from inside the Portfolio Manager account. And you would do this by clicking on Contacts inside Portfolio Manager. You find the person that you need to connect with, usually by looking up a name or an email. You add a new connection, and then you find them and click on Connect. Then the data verifier will look inside their Portfolio Manager account under Notifications and accept the request. This is step 1, and it's just connecting the 2 people inside Portfolio Manager. Then we need to go to the next step, where the building owner shares the property with the data verifier in Portfolio Manager. So the building owner on their side in Portfolio Manager will go into the Sharing tab, click on Share or Edit Access to a Property, and then you select the properties that you want to share with the data verifier. Then the building owner chooses what permission they want them to have. For data verification, you need to choose full access. So you would find the person on the list, choose the permissions under Personalized Sharing and Exchange Data, and then you would pick full access and then click on Share Properties. So then the data verifier may need some additional information to support the verification process. They may ask for additional building documentation like blueprints or as-built to be able to verify square footage, possibly a rent roll if you're in a multifamily building, number of utility meters, copies of usually at least 1 utility bill for each fuel, any other detailed information about your building, or additional documentation based on what other information you put in Portfolio Manager. So then the data verifier is going to confirm the benchmarking data. Now, as the data verifier is checking the benchmarking report, they may assist the building owner in updating their benchmarking data for all of the reasons that we talked about earlier, to either normalize the data for performance targets, to exclude allowable energy uses, to correct benchmarking data points like square footage or energy, or for other reasons that make the benchmarking report as accurate as possible. So important guidance for data verifiers. Data verification does not require an on-site visit, but it is up to the data verifier if they feel confident enough to sign the document without an on-site visit. Building owners can choose to benchmark their building as one property type following EPA guidance, or they may break down high-intensity property types by square footage. You should ask the building owner which methodology they followed before verifying that information. If you find through this process that it would really benefit the building owner to break out those high-intensity property types, you can make that suggestion to the building owner, but it's up to them to decide whether or not they want to make that change. For the indoor environmental quality section, data verifiers can write not applicable or NA for the benchmarking report submissions for performance evaluation years. If the data verification is for a target adjustment, the data verifier can write in NA if they feel those questions do not apply to the target adjustments requested. At this time, we really don't have any target adjustments that have much to do with indoor environmental quality, but we could possibly have some in the future, and so we're leaving this kind of open-ended at the moment. Our office is not defining a % accuracy of verified square footage that would trigger the building owner needing to submit a target adjustment. If the data verifier is uncomfortable with the difference between what they think the square footage of the building is through that supplied documentation versus what the building owner states the square footage is in Portfolio Manager, the data verifier is in their rights to refuse verification of the building. So next step, the data verifier generates the data verification checklist and fills it out, like what we were talking about. It's under the reporting tab, and you click on this PDF link that says data verification checklist on the right-hand side. Once they generate the data verification checklist, to do that, they have to select a report to download. The data verification checklist is usually already checked. You need to select the property or properties for the report, select which time frame is for the report, and that needs to match whether or not you are doing it for a benchmarking performance evaluation year or a target adjustment year from that previous chart. And then you select the context for the report of who the report would go to. So then you click on generate and download the report, and then it gives you a PDF to fill out. Then you complete the data verification checklist. It's separated into 4 sections, talking about whole property characteristics, property use details, energy consumption, and then a signature block at the end. After completing the review of the sections, the data verifier will need to write in their name, the date, and their signature on the final page of the checklist. A stamp is not required for Energized Denver submission. The building owner should then keep the signed checklist on file. So when, depending on what type of verification you are doing, there are 2 different processes for that. For benchmarking year verification for performance evaluation, the info will be transmitted through Portfolio Manager with the report submission for that year. And to do that, you have to go into the Details tab, click on Add Verification Information, and then fill out everything that's on the right-hand side of this slide to make sure that your information is in there and that it gets transmitted within Portfolio Manager. Then the owner keeps that signed PDF in their records. If it is a target adjustment, the signed PDF, which could be a copy, it does not have to be the original, must be submitted with the target adjustment application. So you really only have to fill out the data verifier section in Portfolio Manager if you're doing it for a benchmarking evaluation year. So to close out the part of the slide deck, we have a couple of new resources available. We have updated our data verification page within the benchmarking requirements in our website. So if you go to the Energized Denver Hub, click on buildings 25,000 square feet and larger, and then click on benchmarking requirements, you will see the bullet point that says data verification. A very light version of today's presentation is available on the website, and then down near the bottom is where you will see the new process guide for third-party data verification, which is now available on that website. And that has everything that I just talked about and even a little bit more detailed information on what to click on inside Portfolio Manager. So now that's the end of the content. So we will turn it over to Derek so he can ask the questions that are in the Q&A. If you haven't asked your question yet, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and put in your question.
Thanks, Sharon. So we have 2 questions right now. First one is, when breaking out a high intensity building type, can this also be broken out as a separate property if energy consumption is metered separately and it's a separate building, but identified together by the city since it's the same parcel?
Yes, but we'd have to make sure that they're metered separately. One of the things that we've had, we don't go by parcel, we go by building structure. And so if you had one same parcel that had 2 separate buildings and they were completely separated on the utility meters, you would just need to talk to our help desk and they can work with you to break out those buildings into 2 different buildings within our system. And then they would each have their own EUI target and benchmarking requirements. I think one of the things that we have found out is the biggest problem with campuses is that either the water or the natural gas is not broken out. So those 2 buildings have to be completely separate for us to be able to separate them in our system. But you can do that. Just call our help desk.
And that's also if both buildings are over 25,000 square feet. If one of the other ones is under, then it would not have an EUI target.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to Derek's information, we just recently had this particular situation where one building was over 25,000 square feet and the other building was about 20,000 square feet. We did separate them because they had separate utility meters, and then the smaller building that was under 25,000 square feet is now subject to our small building prescriptive requirements. So we can separate these buildings, but we have to make sure they're completely separate on utility meters.
Thank you. Next question. If the data verifier finds that changes need to be made to the property in Energy Star in order to confidently verify the data, would they make those recommendations to the property owner and then generate/process the data verification checklist after changes have been made?
Yes, that's exactly what you would need to do. So make the changes within the system, generate the data verification checklist, and then you're verifying the final information, and the building owner would need to resubmit that report to us so that when we get the data verification checklist, let's say for a target adjustment, we've got the most recent, most corrected and accurate benchmarking report. So it would be two processes. It would be the data verification checklist made on the most accurate information, and they would also have to resubmit the benchmarking data.
Do we need to verify property use details that are only for the purpose of generating an Energy Star score? I.e., do we need to verify entries such as number of computers, number of workers on main shift, etc.? Details that don't affect the site EUI.
Yeah, I would say details that affect the site EUI, because we don't need the number of computers, number of workers on main shift. I know that information is in the data verification checklist because that checklist was generated for Energy Star score certification. But if those particular pieces of information are not necessary for site EUI because we're not using Energy Star score, you don't necessarily need to verify those items. What I will say, though, is if in the future we figure out a way to take some of that information and create maybe an additional target adjustment, like we're looking at some additional target adjustments possibly for hospitals at this moment, but I'm not sure exactly where that's going to go. And so if you don't have that information in the system, then it's really hard for us to possibly generate a target adjustment that's maybe retroactive, in the future if somebody didn't put that information in. So our suggestion is that if you can put that information in the benchmarking report, it's probably a good idea to do that. But it is, because it does not affect the site EUI, you would not need to verify that information if they did not put it in.
Thank you. To separate a swimming pool from the energy used for the building, does the pool energy need to be on a separate meter from the rest of the building? Or do we just need the volume of the pool and the energy use is estimated based on that?
Yeah, this one, it's the definition. So if you can submeter it, we need to know the actual energy used in that space. And in most cases, like indoor pools or even outdoor pools are heated by a central boiler or something that is also providing heat for the rest of the building, which means you can't submeter it. There's just really no way to do that properly, which is why we have a target adjustment for swimming pools based on the volume of the pool, and then we give a KBTU credit based on that. So it would have to be a separate meter from the rest of the building if you want to submeter, if you want to subtract that energy from the portfolio manager report. If you only have the volume of the pool and they're estimating energy use, that's what our target adjustment is for. So if you can't submeter it, then you have to use the target adjustment pathway.
Thank you. And maybe worth noting with that too, mostly outdoor pools are probably the easiest one that you'd be able to submeter, especially if they're open year round. That way you can remove that energy usage. That's all the questions we have right now too, but we'll give it another minute or a couple seconds to see if anybody else has any more questions. All right. Looks like that. Oh, one more. Are there any exceptions to the whole building reporting? Typically, there are applicable takeoffs such as for restaurant/retail that apply for buildings working towards Energy Star.
Yeah, we looked at some of those takeoffs where they say, well, if the restaurant's less than 10% of your building, you should, exclude it for Energy Star certification. I don't think they don't give you enough of a break on, let's say, a building performance standard target as they would for Energy Star score certification. So when people have asked me this question before, my Energy Star score certification is really important to me. Why should I benchmark differently because of this new building performance standard? And I said, well, the Energy Star source certification does not have penalties if you don't do something. And so I've always, asked folks to think about the trade-off, that it's probably more important to break out those property types and maybe just don't do Energy Star score certification anymore, to make sure that you get the most applicable target for your building that you could possibly get, fined for if you don't meet that target. So in some of those situations, it's really a building owner situation, and maybe just doing some calculations of which methodology of just benchmarking it as one building type versus breaking out your high intensity property types and doing the example of that strip mall, and just make those calculations. They're really simple because it's just a weighted average based on square footage that you could calculate yourself and see which one benefits you more, and then choose, and then that's the way you should choose to benchmark.
Thank you. Is there any thought that the 30% reduction ACO will be expanded to other high intensity building types? They have heard conflicting thoughts on this.
No, that particular, I think there's been conversations happening. There hasn't been any conflicting thoughts on it from our perspective. And if you've heard that from folks, please let me know so I can correct them. The 30% reduction, the alternate compliance option available to the buildings that are only have a 30% reduction goal, that is only for those buildings and possibly historical buildings. If they have been restricted by the Land Preservation Commission on what they can do. So that is not going to be expanded at this time.
Will we be publishing a list of verifiers?
So we're definitely not going to do something like a preferred vendor list. What we have is a trained list of service providers. And what we're thinking about doing is adding to that directory to have a column as to whether or not they are a data verifier of information. If right now, the service provider list that says all of the people that have been trained in our program and have taken the comprehension quizzes, if you pass the benchmarking segment, it has information in there about this, which we'll be updating with this video. So we do have a list of trained service providers, and under the benchmarking column is where this would be listed.
Is there an online database you recommend for whole building gross square footage, aside from on-site verification? We are an owner that purchases existing buildings. We don't get great data or drawings when we acquire our property.
Yeah, I don't know of an online database. We tried to look at some different versions of this, and almost every single data point disagreed slightly. So I think if you have this conflict where you don't get great data or drawings, I think you're honestly just going to have to do an on-site verification and maybe a quick walkthrough. We had to do this in a city that I worked in before, and we found out that all of these different databases disagreed, and we ended up just spending a little bit of money per building to get these on-site verifications done so that we had accurate square footage. So unfortunately, there is not a good place to go, and the assessor's database is definitely not one of them. Sometimes their information is great, and then sometimes it's just way off.
Thank you. If a property installs EV chargers in the coming years, will the building need to submit a target adjustment, or can the property just subtract out the EV charging energy based on their meters?
You would not have to submit a target adjustment. You would just subtract out the EV charging energy based on their meters in the benchmarking report. What I would say is if it's a significant, no, it probably wouldn't be a significant change because you are removing the direct energy that was reported to be used at that station. So you should just be fine subtracting out the EV charging energy based on their meters. But I would say that we would look at that very closely and see if people were having problems with that, or if not all of the energy was being accounted for in those charging stations, and then we'd make a decision at that time. But I really think you're okay just subtracting out the charging stations as they're installed in your building.
Yeah. That was the last question now, but we'll give it another minute to see if anybody else has any more questions. Great questions, everybody.
Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in. I love it that we just had a 30-minute webinar and we didn't have to keep you for the whole hour. If you ever have questions on any of this, I encourage you to look at that process guide that has the full instructions on the website, and calling into our help desk. If you just need to ask a general question about these processes, please feel free to call in or email them a question. And if we don't know an answer, then we will figure out an answer. So thank you everyone for attending today. I hope you have a great day.
But one final question, it's a good closing one.
Okay.
This video will be posted
Yes.
in the next week or so. So look for that as well. And it will be on our website.
Yeah, we'll put it on the data verification page within the benchmarking section, and we will also be adding it to the service provider training in the benchmarking section under that training page. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.